the work that we've been doing, give you a progress report. But these are certainly unusual times, and we want to recognize that. We want to thank you for coming out. We understand that there are a number of people who couldn't or thought otherwise, and we wanted to make every accommodation possible.
To move away a little.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. To make sure that we're able to disseminate this information, so we are live streaming this event on Facebook, and we will also have links to some of the documents that we reference that will be available on the Eye on Edgewood Facebook page and the Eye on Edgewood website. So Jerry, go ahead and give a little introduction to our live stream folks.
I want
joining us.
I want to thank everybody that called in and volunteered not to come or called in with concerns about coming. We're all concerned about it. We followed the health department guidelines for mass gatherings that the governor has outlined. The facility here, the church, actually uses hospital level sanitation. So we've got that, we've got hand sanitizers everywhere. We've had people opening the doors so that other people didn't have to touch the doorknob. So we're doing everything that we can. If this had been a couple of weeks later, I think we might have canceled the meeting. As it was, we set up the live stream venue from here. We promised that we would make this, present this new information, so we're here to do that. Something else happened this week that was out of the ordinary is we lost Howard Calkins, who passed away. I don't know how many of you were here at the last meeting. So Howard came and actually spoke at the last meeting. If we can, yeah, that's Howard right there, and that's actually him right here at this venue. I knew Howard since about 1975, and some of the things I admired about Howard was his directness, authenticity, his outspokenness. He was very cared deeply about Edgewood, and I know you all do too, or you wouldn't be here tonight. I really want to acknowledge you for showing up. There's a saying that about 90% of life is showing up, and you all have showed up, and it makes a difference. I want you to know we have been, it empowers us to continue to do the work we're doing, and also it shows your commitment to the community, which is important. There's strength in numbers, and politicians and government usually only listen to the numbers. So I appreciate that. And let's go to the next clip. I've got a little video of Howard from our last meeting that kind of typifies Howard. I think it represents him pretty well.
As if he's my second cousin. He hates my guts. And his looks we need to stand up and do something. And I'm glad you're having this meeting. And you see I'm here on oxygen. But I thought I needed to come to this meeting because things are, it's too bad. It's just going crazy. And we just hope everybody pays attention and wakes up to the fact of what's happening. Thank you. You do something about this. I know John Massett, he's my second.
So even in his 90s, Howard was 96, even in his 90s, on oxygen and ill health, he cared enough to come and show up as you all have, and encouraged everybody to get involved because he saw the way things had gone off the rails. So we thought about having a moment of silence for Howard, but Howard wasn't a silent man. He was a participator, as you all are. So how about if we give him a big round of applause?
And given that we're in church, I figured it would be proper to quote a little scripture. And I found a fitting verse for Howard in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 7. That says, "The memory of a just and righteous man is blessed." And we certainly are thankful to Howard for all that he's done for this community, and certainly for coming to our meetings and being involved and lending his name and credibility to our cause.
And just so you all know, his funeral services are tomorrow for anybody that wants to attend at Harris Hanlon Mortuary in Moriarty. Okay, so for tonight, if we could put up the next slide. This is why we're here. This is what we learned last time at this meeting about all the ways in which the town government had run off the rails. So I saw a significant number of hands, and I don't know how many in the live stream audience weren't here last time, so we want to give a short recap to just hit the highlights of all the things that we exposed at the last meeting, and got some very clear direction from the people that were here to move forward with some of the actions that we've taken. So why are we here? If we can go to slide 4. This is the Main Street Cactus area where residential sewer has been extended at the cost of some very, very large expenditures. The white line is Main Street. That's the Dairy Queen over there on the left corner. And that's where the sewer was advertised to be going. It was the Cactus Main Sewer Extension, still called that. But it ended up going on the Bassett family property up there in the blue line. So when we saw this, we thought this is something the public should know about. It's not legal to profit from public funds for a public official to do that. The public really came out against it because residential sewer, the way they conceived of it is you would have to destroy your septic tank and then hook up to this line. And originally, they required everybody to do it within a certain number of feet. Then the community turned out en masse, opposed it. So they backed off a little bit and said, we're gonna give you an exemption as long as your septic tank is functioning, and as soon as it doesn't, then you're gonna have to do it. But that's not a realistic economic model. The way the sewer works for most towns is we lose about $300,000 a year on that sewer in operating costs. But it's more than made up by the fact that it brings in business, and business generates gross receipts taxes, which the town gets to capture part of. So we're bringing in somewhere around $4 million a year in gross receipts tax. So it makes sense commercially. Residential, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Is Heather Mitchell here tonight? She said she might come tonight. Okay. Well, it was her neighborhood that they were going to extend it into next. Here's my pointer there. So this is Bassett property here, and this is where the line ended up going. The phase 2 is they conceived of it, and this is all prioritized by the town on an agenda mostly driven by the mayor. This is also Bassett property, and this is where the phase 2 is going to go. Down that road on West Church, there are about 17 possible residential hookups. So 17 hookups, they all came out in force and said they didn't want it, which leaves only one customer, which is right here, this acreage which belongs to the Bassett family. So if we could put up slide 5, this is how it doesn't really make much sense. If you had we figured there were about 8 services possible on Cactus Road, where they spent $1.3 million to put in the sewer. We receive revenue of about $280 a month, which doesn't even cover the cost of the sewer plant per unit. So it would take 387 years to pay that off if it was covering the cost of the sewer plant, which it's not. So the original idea was that sewer was going to stay and the infrastructure was going to stay along the I-40 corridor where sewer already existed, which is along 66. And that plan was working pretty well. They attracted new businesses, Tractor Supply, a lot of the new businesses came in there and that generate gross receipts tax. So let's put up slide 7. So this is Mayor Bassett's campaign promises. All of you have a handout, I think, on that too. But this particular excerpt is concentrate infrastructure in the core area along I-40 where sewer lines already exist. So that was the promise. And then suddenly it all went 180 degrees the other way to go to residential sewer service, which, as I say, it's a total departure economically from anything that makes sense. And the people don't want it. So what happens, I think it also says something about lawyers, but maybe that's on the next slide. So what happens when we go for millions of dollars from the legislature? All this has to be allocated from the legislature. So that's money that is not spent on roads. It's money that's not spent on trails. It could have been spent on trails instead. It could have expanded the commercial side of the sewer system, which actually makes more sense and keeps it in a core area instead of spreading everything out all over the place. One of the things that happens too when you put sewer in, I've seen this happen in other cities, in a nice rural area like the North Valley in Albuquerque where they have larger lots, kind of like we do here. People move here because they like that lifestyle. I certainly do. I don't want to live in high density. A little bit of it is necessary maybe in part of the town, but when they put sewer in 4 or 5 years, the planners change over and they look at this and they say, wow, we could support four lots to an acre or 8 lots to an acre and have some high density. It's more efficient. And then that area ends up looking like a totally different area than it was when before the sewer got put in. So one of the things that happened is this year, Councilor Jaramillo, who I don't know if she's here tonight, yeah, I see you out there, actually made a request of our representative Greg Schneedes from the legislature to get some money for trails. So he was able to get the state and the House and the Senate to both vote to approve a bill which included $350,000 for trails. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed it. But the point here is that all you have to do is ask for these things. They want to provide what the community wants. So unfortunately, until now, until we got involved in some of the things that have happened and the changes in the legislative body, nobody was asking for the kind of things that the town wants. I remember when the town incorporated, people wanted paved roads and they wanted some commercial, didn't want to have to drive to Albuquerque to do their shopping. So those two things are still, I think, core to what people really want here, but no one was asking. So that's changed now, and we appreciate that very much, that you were able to ask Representative Schneedes for that, and that the focus is hopefully going to change from what people don't want and millions of dollars wasted in these residential sewer lines to something that we all do want. And that will increase our quality of life instead of detracting from it. So the other thing that happened last time, if we could put up the next slide, slide 8. We talked about how we couldn't get any information out of the town. There's a law that says if you request it in writing, you're supposed to get it within 15 days. So the town has either been slow playing us or they have not given us information at all. There it is. So this is actually a new request. We showed you one like this last time at the last meeting. This is actually a new IPRA request, and those are the legal bills that we requested. We requested 2 years worth. We got 8 months out of those 2 years, and we have no idea what they're spending the legal money on. Yeah. And it takes a lot of time for somebody to color all that in. So.
And that's certainly less than open and transparent government, which is our objective.
So the other thing that we talked about last time, the big one, was the EPCOR. Their town has been proposing to take over the EPCOR water system. Some of those legal fees, I'm sure, we know at least 80,000 of them have been applied toward EPCOR. And they've spent about 400,000 in the last 5 years on various matters. So EPCOR, when we heard about this, there was a big outcry from the public, and they had a meeting in July, I think, of 2018. And the town came out vehemently opposed to it. It's been continuing forward in closed meeting sessions, some of which they haven't even notified the public on the agenda of what they were going to be talking about in closed session. The Attorney General, after a complaint from one of our members, agreed with us, wrote a letter to the town and said, you have got to start posting what it is you're talking about at the very least in these closed sessions. The public has the right to know what you're discussing in private. So the EPCOR takeover has not, we've been asking for updates meeting after meeting, have not received anything. You can hear crickets in the room when we ask for the updates. So we know it's proceeding, or they would have come out and said, we've given up on the idea. I think we ought to go to the next slide. So we did some, this is the cost of condemnation in a study that was done by a National Water Association. And you can see the orange bars are what usually gets advertised as the cost of the condemnation, what it's going to cost the town to pick up the water system and all the legal bills. It always ends up being at least double, sometimes triple what they advertise. So we have a local example of this in El Dorado. Let's go to that next slide. So we did a comparative analysis, and El Dorado, which is right up by Santa Fe, thought they were going to take over the water system for $6 million. It ended up being 12, which is very consistent with those other past models. And so by the time they got done, this is what they're paying now on average, because they varied some of the cost of the acquisition, since it was an overrun, in a property tax, which is called a mill levy. So versus what EPCOR charges for the same amount of water is about $72 a month. So it's a huge impact on us. Nobody wanted it that we could find. We had a lot of input from the last meeting. People said, well, what can we do to stop this? What can we do to stop this kind of behavior and wasting money? So taking that direction, we decided that we would take the actions that the public outcry was demanding. How do we stop this? How do we change our government to a more open style with bottom-up government, where we're actually represented, the will of the people ends up happening in the town, instead of a couple of individuals deciding that they're going to take a detour from even their campaign promises. So these are the campaign promises that the mayor did. You've got a copy of this in your packet if you want to look at that, or you can look at this. Spend more money for roads and less on lawyers. Well, there hasn't been a single new paved road in Edgewood in the last 4 years under this mayor's tenure. He promised more paved roads. There has been some resurfacing of roads that has taken an extraordinary amount of time. Even that was another story. Welcome input from all citizens. We've been harangued, we've been cursed at in public meetings. Some of the other counselors have been cursed at in these public meetings. Not the kind of public behavior that I'd like to see, and not what was promised, certainly. Return to a customer service model, prompt, helpful information. They're still stonewalling us on a lot of this information. Concentrate the infrastructure along I-40 where sewer lines already exist. That didn't happen. Put more money into roads and trails. That didn't happen. Decrease spending on legal fees. That didn't happen. Encourage council participation during meetings and stop the retaliation against council members. Since we've been live recording and archiving these council meetings, we would have probably a full day of clips that we could play where this kind of behavior has happened. So I think we deserve better than that. That's why we're here. Certainly that's the promise of the direction that we're heading. We want more open and responsible government. So how do we get the course correction? What can we do about it? And during the last meeting, we took some direction from the audience, and we've come up with some new ways of affecting the town government and steering it back on course. This is Edmund Burke. Does anybody know Edmund Burke? A couple of you do. He was a Scottish philosopher, and some of his stuff really made it into the American Revolution and influenced the Constitution. But his philosophy was that the only thing that's necessary for evil to exist and to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So this is the opposite of that. That's what was happening before, but now that you all are active, now that people are watching, it is starting to shape the behavior, and certainly it's not where we want it to be or where we want it to end up, but it is having an impact. So I want to really make a point of that. Everybody can do something. Not everybody can do everything, but everybody can do something, and just showing up is huge. So you want to talk about the new actions and what we've taken?
Yes, absolutely. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've talked about doing is changing the form of government in the town of Edgewood from the mayor-council form of government to the commission-manager form of government. We want to give you some information about some of the differences between the two models. Currently, we have a town council that's comprised of 4 councilors and 1 mayor. Under the commission-manager form of government, we would now have 5 commissioners, and the town would be districted into 5 districts. Each of these districts would be equal in population to the fullest extent possible, and it would make sure that our town council is more representative. Now, what I'm about to say is not the actual case or facts on the ground, but under the current form of government, mayor-council, it's possible that you could have an entire governing body who lived in the same neighborhood. Mm-hmm. With the commission-manager form of government, that does not occur.
And one of the really nice things about this is allowed by statute. All we have to do is initiate a petition, which we have and are circulating tonight. Is that already circulating? Did anybody?
We'll start it right now.
Yeah, we can start that as we're talking. So basically, what it does is it decentralizes the power from the mayor running the agenda. Right now, only the mayor can put things on the agenda, so he decides what's even discussed. Because you can't really discuss items that aren't on the agenda, because then it violates the Open Meetings Act. You can't take any action on it. So it really decentralizes. You have 5 equal people, all of whom get to put whatever they want on the agenda. Did you have a question, sir?
Yeah, are you proposing that we move from the mayor council to commission manager?
That's what we're proposing, and what it takes is a petition signed by at least 15% of people who voted in the last mayoral election, which is not much. I think about 550 people voted, so with somewhere around 80 signatures is all it would take to get it on the ballot. Then you have a special election, and people get to vote for or against it. Yes, sir.
Just a real quick comment. While I actually don't live in the confines of the Edgewood, the town of Edgewood, doesn't seem to me like a good idea.
Okay, well, let's go through the rest of it and we can talk about the pros and cons, and we'll have a discussion. The first part of this meeting is really presenting the information, and then the last half of the meeting or so will be open discussion where we can take comments, ask questions, and that's the whole idea, is throw this out to the public and see what you all want to do. So, and the ballot initiative only, the petition only sets it up to have the special election, and then we all vote. And if more people vote for it, then that's the way it will go. If not, it'll remain the way it is.
Sure, and we might as well hit the highlights while the question is before the crowd, which is this. The principal differences between these two forms of government are that under the commission manager form of government, the town is run by a professional employee, somebody who is qualified by training and experience to actually run the day-to-day affairs of the town. That is not currently the case today. The town could choose to do so, but as of today, the mayor is the chief executive officer for the town of Edgewood. Under the commission manager form of government, you get somebody who's got the training to do that type of work. It also makes all of your elected officials equal in rank. So one of the 5 commissioners gets elected as mayor to serve as a ceremonial head over the governing body, but they still vote as a commissioner. And you don't get the situation where one person has an inordinate amount of control. The other thing that it does is it provides additional citizen rights that we don't have today. And we'll go through some of these on the slide as we go. And we think that some of these might be important for your consideration. Whether or not it's something that you would choose to support or vote for is entirely up to you. And we're certainly not trying to twist anybody's arms, but like Jerry said, it's to provide information so that you can make an informed choice. So here we are on the slide for the mayor, and you can see that there are some differences. And another key difference in the the commission manager form of government is that this person who's elected the ceremonial head as mayor only serves for a term of 2 years, and then they would have to be reelected, or that person would change in position. Under the mayor council form of government, we can go to the next slide. Under the mayor council form of government, the governing body is like the legislature. They're the legislative body for the town, but they don't have any executive powers to actually take actions. All of those executive powers rest with the mayor. Under the commission manager form of government, all of the powers of the town rest with the governing body comprised of 5 commissioners, and then all the actions are taken through this town manager, who is the chief administrative officer. So we can go to the next slide. Town management, something that we've touched on just a minute ago. Essentially that the town would be run by a professional as opposed to someone who is just merely elected to office. Next slide, please.
And in that regard, it would take the entire commission to fire that person, whereas right now, that person serves at the pleasure of the mayor. So if he doesn't do exactly what the mayor wants him to do, even though it might be opposing some of the councilors, that person can be fired. Again, it centralizes power in the mayor. And that's one of the problems we've seen here, is that the agenda has been driven without the other councilors having as much input.
Town meetings, business, and agendas. Again, this would be set by the majority of the commission under the commission manager form of government, and the town would be required to have at least 2 meetings per month. One of the things that we've noticed under the mayor council form of government is sometimes the town's meeting schedule is erratic. Now, that may not be uncommon or without justification, but what we've seen over time is that sometimes when certain councilors are going to be absent, the mayor will cancel the meeting. But at other times, when other councilors are going to be absent, he'll proceed with the meeting so that he can move certain items of his agenda through with less opposition. This would prevent much of that under the commission manager form of government. We think that's an additional benefit. Next slide, please. Removal or recall. And this is the starting point of where the commission manager form of government provides additional rights to the public. Under the current form of government, the only reason that you can remove a public official is for malfeasance in office. Malfeasance means they have to commit some sort of illegal act. Under the commission manager form of government, you can remove elected officials not only for an unlawful act, but even for a lawful act that's improperly done, and for other violations or conduct that would constitute a violation of their oath of office.
The practical effect of that is, if the town, as they did, implemented, put in these sewer lines and used millions of dollars to do that instead of paving roads and that, and then enacts an ordinance that says you're going to have to destroy your septic tank, you could spend $10,000 to $17,000 doing that and hooking up to the sewer, and you don't like that, and somebody is in particular driving that agenda, or a few people, you could actually recall them.
True. Next slide, please. And this will touch on the point that you just made, which is the right of referendum. Under the current form of government, we cannot do this. Under the commission manager form of government, if the town adopts an ordinance and the public doesn't like it, you can actually force the town to call a special election and put it to the people. And if the people vote it down, that ordinance is rescinded and repealed. It also does not go into effect while the petition is pending. Like I said, we don't have this option today. And maybe if we did, there'd be some things that wouldn't have taken progress or foothold in this community that we think can certainly be damaging, like mandatory residential sewer connections.
I don't even think we would have to be here tonight if this form of government had been implemented, because as you can see, a lot of the problems are centralized power in the mayoral office. And that creates an opportunity. Some of our mayors didn't take the opportunity, but it creates an opportunity for somebody, if they're so inclined, to abuse their power and drive an agenda that isn't consistent with what the other councilors want or what the public wants. This is really empowering people to have the bottom-up kind of democracy that I think was envisioned by the founding fathers in the Constitution, that really allows you all to have a demand accountability, and if you're not getting accountability, you have these tools to enforce accountability so that your representatives will actually be representing you and what you want instead of what they particularly want for themselves or for a limited number of people.
Absolutely true. Next slide, please. Now, the flip side of the coin of referendum is called initiative. And what the commission manager form of government allows you to do is it allows you to request the town to take some sort of action, to adopt an ordinance, to take some measure that we believe is in the public interest. And if the town refuses to take action on it, after a period of 30 days, again, you can file a petition, and if you get the requisite number of signatures, you can compel the town to have a special election to decide whether or not that a new ordinance or measure is going to be passed. Now, again, under our current form of government, this is a right that we don't have, and we think that this is another advantage to the new model.
Yeah, so let's say that we decided, well, there's no money being spent on trails. So let's enact a measure that will require that some percentage, 5% of the town's revenue is expended on trails. So that's, people could get together, put that on the ballot, see if everybody wants it by voting, a majority wants it, then it gets enacted automatically. So it creates an enormous amount of power, vests an enormous amount of power in the residents here, as opposed to the top-down kind of management that's happening now, which is a kind of ivory tower. If they get divorced from what people want and go off on these tangents, it's hard to get that back under the current form of government.
It's true. We live in a representative democracy, but we believe in government by the people, of the people, and for the people. And the commission manager form of government gives more of those rights that were envisioned by the founders than does the mayor council form of government.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I've got a message to do with this stuff. And I've been a commissioner, county commissioner in another state.
Somebody get a microphone?
Yeah, we've got a microphone.
Can we get a
here.
microphone?
Yeah, what you're advocating here is sort of, it can meld into chaos, because once you have more people involved, okay, your biggest problem is, as I see it here, and I don't know your mayor. Okay, I live here in Edgewood.
The problem is our mayor isn't the mayor.
Okay,
What he wants to own.
okay, if that's your problem, then you should not have elected him. But the other thing is, if you have one person in power, okay, which is what the right side here is advocating, and he can pretty much do what he wants, you probably want to consider making measures to amend the right side. The left side leads you to chaos.
Well, and I appreciate
There's a whole lot more to this. I mean, you're giving the people here the superficial of it all. Okay, the intricate workings of this are far more intricate and far more confusing to everybody, and they will be as time goes on.
Okay, can I get my mic back? All right.
No.
So here's the thing, we're going to go into discussion a little bit. I appreciate what you're saying. This is an open forum, unlike some of the town meetings where you can't really say much. So this is the purpose that we're here. We can't give you all of the permutations of this, but we can give you the general overview of this. The commission manager form of government is, if you're happy with the direction the town is going now, then you have there's no reason to vote for this. And it will be put on a ballot, and if we get the requisite number of petition signatures, and people can vote. Some may vote against, some may vote for, that's democracy. The issue, though, is we could have unelected or elected a new mayor and 2 new councilors that would have been up this month. But as you all know, probably from our previous meeting and some of the other information on our website, they extended their terms for almost 2 years by just voting that for themselves. Now, the legislature wrote that into law, but the district attorneys, who are also affected under that same law, opposed it on constitutional grounds, stated that it was unconstitutional. It went to the Supreme Court of New Mexico, and the Supreme Court agreed. So we believe, unfortunately, it didn't include municipal elections, otherwise it would have overturned what the town did. But under the commissioner-manager form of government, we could have put that on a referendum, or an initiative, and we could have invalidated what they did. They could have shortened their terms. They had the option. Now, I've heard defenses from the mayor and some other people that, well, that was allowed by law. Well, it was also allowed to shorten their terms by a couple of months to sync them up with the general election, or to extend them. So they could have preserved our democratic right to vote and shortened their terms. We would have had that election in November of last year.
That's right. And one of the things that we believe is most important is your voice. And in the form of government that we have in this country, you get to exercise your voice through your vote. And we have been robbed of the opportunity that we should have had to vote this month. And this model of government is one opportunity or one way to try to restore that voice and to give us a proper election and a say in who our representatives should be.
Now, the problem too is, how do you reform, like I know the gentleman back here was saying that, how do you reform the mayor-council form of government under this system? They're resisting everything that we have said about the commission-manager form of government because obviously they want that centralized power. It's good for them, but I haven't seen any evidence that it's good for us. I certainly don't like what I'm seeing, the way the town is expending money and on what items it is expending money.
Sure, and there are ways, to respond to the point, there are things that can be done under the mayor-council form of government. Under that form of government, it is the governing body that sets its own rules and its procedures and the manner with which it's going to do business. The problem is, you can't take any item of public business unless it's properly noticed on an agenda. And if the councilors can't get the issue on the agenda because the mayor won't set it, then those things can't take place.
Right, exactly. So are we ready to go into the question and answers and public comment section, or do we have more that we want to talk about?
I think we have a couple of additional slides. Now, we want to tell you that in the course of our investigations, we have found some interesting information. What we were first doing is we were looking at that picture that we had up earlier, and we don't need to go back to it, that showed where the sewer line was supposed to be built versus where it was placed on the Bassett property. And as we were investigating some of the real property records with the Santa Fe County Clerk's Office, we noticed that some of those lots on Main Street were significantly undervalued. Now, I don't know what that means, but interesting information. So I said, we might as well do a little bit more digging. And what I've done is I've compiled a spreadsheet that shows all of the properties that I could find that are owned by Carl and Josephine Bassett. These are the mayor's parents. Carl has since passed, but of the 22 properties in Santa Fe County, we've determined that they own just under 1,400 acres, and the taxes that they pay for that property is a little under $2,800. That math works out to about $1.95 an acre. Now, I don't know where you get a deal like that. I'd certainly like to find one for myself. I would say that again. We had determined by searching the records that some of the Bassett properties appear to be undervalued. They own approximately 1,400 acres on the bottom here, Jerry, with the totals. Approximately 1,400 acres. The total assessed value is $314,000. Taxable value, $104,000. And they pay approximately $2,700 in property tax.
Some of these are 1 acre lots here. The smaller lots are assessed value is $5.
And that's commercial property.
Yeah, I've owned property out here, and I have never had any property assessed at those kind of numbers.
Now, we don't know what that means, and we're not making any allegations.
Assessed at how much
$5.
per acre?
No. Well, that's for 1 acre lot, yeah. But I have lots even in Moriarty that are way out in the boonies that are assessed at about 10 times, or more than that, it'd be 20 times that, I guess. So, like I say, this came out in the investigation that we've been doing in the lawsuit, which we're going to talk about next. We need to talk. I forgot we didn't talk about that. So now that we have the ability to subpoena records, we are doing a more thorough investigation because we couldn't get it under the rightful entitlement under the New Mexico Inspection of Public Records Act. The town hasn't complied with some of that. So we are going to continue that. We'll keep you updated on this, but it just something about it doesn't ring right. And while our taxes are going up, this administration enacted a property tax, which we never had in Edgewood. And then it seems like certain people are getting special breaks, which seems to be happening with the sewer and other things. So you want to talk about the lawsuit?
Yeah, we'll go on to the next slide here.
That's our email account. So for those of you that are at home, I wanted to put this up there. It's probably out of order, but this is our email. If you want to be on our email list and get updates that way, which is easier, you can just send us a request at that email address. So until he gets the slide up, let's fill in the blank here. So one of the things that happened at the last meeting, people were very powerfully adamant about how do we remove the mayor because he's violated he's benefited from public funds, which is misuse of public funds. And we found out at one point that he had hired his first cousin, which is prohibited by the nepotism ordinance that the town of Edgewood's had on the books for probably 15 years. And it's not just a principle matter, because what happens is he appointed her as the head of or a member of the Planning and Zoning Board. Planning and zoning is supposed to be independent from the governing body. So there's such a thing in the law as undue influence, where you're not supposed to influence, one body's not supposed to influence except through the process, because the process protects everybody's rights, everybody gets treated equally. Well, that didn't happen, and the Planning and Zoning Board also has the power to change or propose changes to our zoning laws. That has happened, and we've noted in our investigations recently that some of those changes seem to benefit the Bassett property and to devalue or to diminish the rights of others. To be able to have, say, for example, industrial park on less than a certain amount of acreage. So they expanded the amount of acreage. It's larger lots, which don't exist within the zone that they're talking about, except properties owned by the Bassets. So we're turning up more information in the process of this legal situation. But we filed this action. It's not about, we're not asking for money for ourselves. We're not asking for money, it's for the town. And this is a removal action that we're asking the court to remove the mayor under the statutes that say you can't hire your relatives, you can't have undue influence, and also you can't benefit from public funds.
That's accurate. The lawsuit that we filed was filed in early February of 2020, and the course of the proceedings at this point are beginning to enter into the discovery phase, where we will be doing investigation and trying to obtain information from the town and from other parties who have knowledge about the details of this project. One of the things that we believe to be a flat fact that is beyond dispute is that sewer collection lines were installed on the mayor's property and that the mayor didn't pay for it. And I should clarify, it may not be the mayor's property, it's where the mayor lives. The property is deeded to his mother, but it is at 34 New Mexico State Highway 344.
And the statutes say you can't benefit your family. It's the same as benefiting yourself, so it would be the same situation.
Correct. So the issues in the lawsuit are simple. The facts might be subject to some dispute. I mean, we don't think that there can be much, but essentially what we have alleged is that the state constitution provides that if any public officer takes public monies for their own benefit, that's against the Constitution.
And the penalty is actually under some of these state statutes. They're banned for life from public office. Once you are proven to have benefited from public funds, then you're banned from life. It's that serious an offense. The legislature thought it was.
The state constitution also provides that no government agency, including the town of Edgewood, can contribute public money to a private interest. That's the anti-donation clause, and we believe that was violated also.
We're just about finished with this. Can you hold that for a question for a second? Is it on this point? Let's get a mic over there and we'll take one question and then we'll get into it. We're just about to start the question and answer phase.
In the parking lot coming in here, a kind gentleman handed me a document produced by the mayor. And my question is, what year was that extension put onto that property that we're talking about?
2018.
Which was during his tenure.
Yes, sir.
Okay, his comment was, where was CORE in 2015 when a sewer line extension was run up Walker Road at a cost of $134,000 without council approval under the previous mayor? Is that the same road?
No. Walker Road is behind Walgreens.
Okay, so what I see in his document is a pointing of fingers, because he named all kinds of counselors who voted for things, and otherwise a tout dance and BS.
Can I get my mic back? So, am I on?
No, you had it.
Hello? Am I on now? This is like my cell phone. Does that make it come on? Okay, so the light has to be off for me to be able to talk. All right, so, I think that's kind of perceptive, because what I noticed, I just skimmed that thing. This is the first time I've seen it tonight. I'm going to take it home and read it, but what I noticed is I'm very familiar with some of the things he's talking about, the actual circumstances. And in certain conditions, and this is going to come out in this lawsuit, in certain ways, they flim-flam some of the counselors. And they wouldn't give them maps on things they were voting for. And we have audio recordings. Thank God the audio recorded some of these meetings, where one of the counselors, Counselor Abrahams, is demanding a map to know where the sewer is going to go that they're voting on. All they're providing is the overall town design, which is everything. So you can't tell what it is you're even voting on. So we'll have a response to some of that stuff, I'm sure. But that's what I've noticed as a pattern, and is that in going through the information and doing our investigation, we're finding more and more that there were even times where documents were altered in order to get a certain outcome or a vote by the council. So this stuff's all going to be done in court. Last night I was at the council meeting, and there seemed to be about 4 proponents of the mayor's that show up sometimes to talk. We've had hundreds there of people that feel similarly to the way we do. But they were disparaging CORE and saying, well, I've heard that they're saying bad things about people, and we're not talking about people, other than we're talking about their behavior with public funds. We're talking about their behavior in a public forum, and the way that they're suppressing input or dissent from some of the counselors and not giving them the information that they need to represent us and avoid these kind of snafus.
Yeah, and I think it's important to reiterate that our objective is to bring transparency to local government. It is to shine light on the darkness, because when you do that, you find that sometimes the cockroaches will run. And we don't know if there's any bugs in City Hall, but if they are, we're going to try to chase them out.
They call the New Mexico Open Meetings Act and the IPRL, they call it the Sunshine Laws. That's their nickname, and that's what they say. The best disinfectant is sunshine. So we want that kind of openness and transparency here. We've seen a considered lack of that here, and a complete pattern of the opposite. So that's why we're here, and we think that this opportunity for the commission manager form of government will bring another tool and it will prevent that from power from aggregating in one person or a small clique. And in such a small town, I think that's important. In bigger towns, they can't get away with this stuff because they have news cameras on them, the media's there. But in small towns, you can have these little cliques that can, and the mayor-councilor form of government obviously has been utilized to promote the interests of a small few rather than what the public wants.
I think with that, we can stand for questions. Yes, sir, you in the middle. You've had your hand up.
She's coming on your side.
Well, if I may, it would seem to me, and this is in regards and in agreement with the fellow that spoke behind me, that our current form of government in Edgewood mirrors the national, where there is one person in charge, not a group of people. I personally have no problem with that. While I don't always like the person in charge, I wait for an election to try to remove it. Now, whereas, if
you know, if the mayor and the council decides to extend their own terms without an election, by all means, we should stand up against that and speak out and do what we can to voice our concerns, our objections, whatever. I personally, and this is to contradict you, tell me what your name is?
Adrian Terry.
Adrian, okay, I know your dad, a little bit.
Sure.
We do not live in a constitutional democracy. We live in a constitutional republic.
That's correct.
Democracies, did I get lost? I think I'm lost. How do I turn this back on?
Closer to you.
Still no light. Okay. There we go. I saw and viewed a CD, DVD from the John Birch Society that described 5 courses of government. 4 of them always end up in anarchy. And the one that doesn't is the constitutional republic. I would like to stay with that. I don't always necessarily, something's going on here. Okay, I don't always necessarily like who is the one person in charge, but I have the option every 4 years of voting for or against that person. It seems to me that when we have a group of people in charge, and that's basically called an oligarchy, that eventually ends up in anarchy. Democracies in and of themselves fail. A constitutional republic, which seems to me our current form of government mirrors the national scale, I am against changing that.
And thank you for your comment. I would say that we all have our own personal opinions, views, vision of looking at the world. And I certainly recognize that there are challenges with all forms of government. I'm a Christian. I hope to go to heaven one day. And I know that in heaven it will be ruled by a king. But unfortunately, I haven't seen anybody, and I would put myself in this category, I haven't seen anybody that I would trust with power like Jesus Christ. So until we get to that point, we got to work with what we have.
No argument.
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate your comment.
If I may do one more.
Sure.
Our current form of government has worked for the last 240 some years.
Well, we're not overthrowing any governments. We're not changing from a constitutional
And I'm not accusing
republic.
you of it.
Right.
Okay.
We're operating within the structure of the constitutional republic. It's just a different choice in how the government at a local level is structured. So,
I disagree.
okay.
Respectfully.
No problem. You know, we have no problem with that because we want more openness and transparency. That's what it's about. Everybody gets to have their opinion. I respect that. A lot of our ancestors fought and died for that right, and it's a very valuable thing. So it'll all come out in the mix. If government is open, we have all the information, people will do what they want to do, and I'm happy with that outcome. Diane's been had her hand up for a while. I hope that might work.
Yes, and just as an FYI, there are probably 20 cities in New Mexico that have the commission management type of government. Alamogordo, Las Cruces, Clovis, Hobbs, Aztec, just to mention a few. So this is nothing new. It's very common, and they seem to be very successful.
Yeah, it's really just a choice. This gentleman over here has had his hand up for a while. I know that's a long way to run, but can you get him a mic?
Yeah.
Well, except for the live stream. The people on live stream won't be able to hear.
Thank you. Hello? Just speak loud.
Hold it real close to your mouth. Let's see what happens. Mic is still.
Just speak up.
Oh, you got
There's my buddy.
technical difficulties. We've had a slew of them today.
Have a voice, use it.
Wasn't meant to be. Anyways, I just wanted to say one thing. When you have radical measures involved in your government, like you need to change a direction, something that's not going to work, it doesn't really matter what form of government you put in there as long as it's, reflecting what the people want. If the people don't want an expensive sewer system and they'd rather have road repairs, they should get that. So I don't think the constitutional republic is a representative government for a town. That's just the national standard, and I enjoy that, but I don't think it works for a small town like Edgewood. So I would like to see the committee and the council go in. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
What?
How about this gentleman in the back with the hat?
I think I'm gonna have to agree with this man, because we are a small town that has no reflection upon what our federal government does. I have a question. In your lawsuit against the current mayor, do you have to provide a new plan of government?
No.
We're all in agreement that the current mayor is not right. I wasn't here to vote in. I'm sorry to the gentleman over there, Masters. I live in Albuquerque. I own properties out here. So I have interest. I was not involved in the vote, but apparently you voted in, someone voted in someone who is not so good for the town.
Sure, and just to repeat that for the crowd, the question was, in the lawsuit to remove the mayor, does that result in a change of the form of government? And my answer to that question was no. We are seeking to remove the mayor under the existing form of government, and if he is removed, then the office of mayor would remain vacant until the governing body voted to put in his replacement, and that person would then serve until the next election cycle.
No, that makes sense.
You know, what problem voters have here is this town is so small. A lot of times, in fact, it even was true in my case when I voted, what if the only information we have on who to choose to vote for are the lies that we see written by the lying candidate in the case of Bassett? So it's like, I mean, that's all I knew. Like, I'll go to the library and I'll try to read whatever information there is there. But this town is so small, the only information that I may be able to read in the library are the lies that you put up on the screen here that Bassett, I mean, it's just the same thing as like, if you like your doctor, you can keep him. I mean, if you vote on somebody based on just a bold-faced lie, how are you going to vote? So never forget the possibility that you may have to go to plan B, which is you might have to educate the people that when they go to vote, like I said, when I voted last time, I don't even know if I voted for this clown or not, because it's like, you see what they say, and if what they say is all lies, and you base your vote on the lies, again, this town is so small, you're not going to get television advertisements or editorials or anything like that. So keep in mind, if you have to go to plan B, you have to expose the lies with this guy's track record so people know not to vote for that guy. And then the other half of that is somebody has to be groomed not only to take his place, but to take his sidekicks in the council, and you have to expose them for being his lackeys and have those people voted out also. Name them and name who you would recommend to take their place. So if all this other part doesn't, pan out, keep plan B in mind. Bassett's got to go, and the people, his lackeys on the council, they have to be exposed to and named, and also name the person that you would choose to take their place, because I'm telling you, it's really hard even for someone like me to know who to vote for when all you have to go by is their own lies.
Sure, absolutely appreciate that comment.
Thank you very much for your comments. I'm Bob Sturley. I was mayor of this town for a number of years. And when I was mayor, I ran every honest building. I ran it much like the commission. The first thing I did is I gave every counselor the right to put things on the agenda without veto. That's the first thing I did. Your point is well taken. When you vote, all you have is a piece of paper of promises. That's the big benefit of the commission style of government. Because if they don't hold up their promises, you have the power to recall them and replace them. And the mayor council type of government works pretty well if you do have an election every 2 years. But the current government re-elected themselves for 2 years. That's not right.
No, it's not.
2 years, they extended their terms. They violated, the basic fundamental of the mayor council government, which election every 2 years. So I strongly support the commission type of government because that takes away those issues. And you can recall those guys and replace them if they don't hold up their promises. I strongly support it. How about up here in the front? We've had
Turn that mic up, or one of them. You have to pull that down just like
right here in the front.
Is that one off?
Right here.
Hello?
So it's on. It was already on. Testing 1, 2, 3.
You're not on.
Is there something going on back there? Because we've got both these off. Slide doesn't. I'm supposed to be working on
Trump's fault.
Okay. I just wanted to do a little counterpoint here. I've lived in Edgewood since long before Edgewood was a town. I have lived through every mayor that we've had. And with the exception of Mr. Sterling, I have to say that they all pretty much have been just like Mr. Bassett. They all have their own agendas. We've gone through this with the water. We've gone through this with Campbell Ranch. And it always seems to benefit the people in power. So my counterpoint is to the people who say we should keep this form of government. I don't think we should keep this form of government. It keeps proving, because we are a tiny town, and because a great majority of our people don't vote.
Is it on now? Okay.
So the people that get voted in have more of a chance to win because they can get their people out. You can go up and down every road in this town. You go to 7 houses, and 5 or 6 of those houses have no idea about what's going on in town. So I agree with your proposal.
And realize it's just a, thank you. Can you turn that down a little bit? So, and you realize it's just a proposal. We get enough petition signatures, it goes on the ballot. All of this during the ballot election will get hashed out too. People will decide for themselves, do we want a commission manager change in form of government. One of the things I want to emphasize here, there is an urgency to the change in government. Otherwise, we would have waited it out. We would have waited it out until, even though we got our right to vote taken from us this month, it would have been the election. We would have waited until November 2021, except this agenda keeps progressing, and the damage that can be done before 2021 by this type of behavior is enormous on this town. You've got the sewer ordinance. If they keep running these sewer lines in different directions, the town is going to be in a position where, as I was mentioning, we could have a lot of high density. It could change the entire character of the town. And we're using money in ways that are not used for paving roads. Bring this interim period before 2021. So in analyzing all of the options, money has been taken. What can we do? We got to stop the sewer plant was under. The only way that we could do it when the actions were already taken, like these which lawsuits system, which the wheels of itself run. So the EPCOR takeover also could happen. Initiative to change the form of government, because if the election, as we're proposing it under this petition, would happen probably in July or August of this year, which is not that far away, then the commission will reform, or the council will reform itself into a commission. Power gets decentralized. The new rules operate where anybody can put something on the agenda. The new rules operate around revisiting ordinances or canceling ordinances. The new rule will apply about implementing new ordinances that we want. So there is an urgency to it. Otherwise, we would have waited and been happy to wait for the election in 2021.
That's right. I think absent the risk to the private homeowner who has to connect to the system, who has to pay $4,500 in fees and costs to the town, plus the cost of construction, could bankrupt a lot of people. I mean, I could stand here today and tell you that I don't have $15,000 sitting in my bank account.
And I know there's some realtors here in the audience probably tonight, but I can imagine that at some point they're going to have to disclose that you are subject to this sewer ordinance, and at some point you're looking at this big liability, and it's going to discourage the sale of your house. If you want to sell your house, or at least reduce the amount of your equity, because now there's a liability on your house that wasn't there before. Councilor Abrahams, I see in the back there.
One of the biggest concerns is I have been in office through this. I have been fooled, I have been tricked, I have been lied to, I've had all kinds of issues. But in the end, we have spent $1.3 million on a sewer design and a sewer collection line that one person has hooked up to. One. And that, to me, is unacceptable. We still have about $3 million of urgent needs in our sewer plant. My recommendation is fix the sewer plant before you put any more sewage there. And that's been totally disregarded. We still have a notice of violation from New Mexico Environmental Department. We're in violation of our groundwater quality permit. Isn't that sad? And yet we're spending money to connect who to a sewer plant? That is what needs to be addressed. We need to stop the waste of our money. And only you guys can do it. Because I've been trying and have been unsuccessful.
Thank you for that. I just want to say too that it would be easier, you would have had an easier time. I've listened to the audio of a lot of these minutes now as I'm going through methodically because of the lawsuit. We have to prove what we're saying. So I'm documenting it with different things. But in going through that audio, I've heard you. I've heard you pleading with them to give you the information you needed to make a considered decision on some of these items, or to fix the sewer plant instead of adding more line to the sewer plant. So building a sewer system that one person hooks up to is kind of like building a railroad that nobody's going to ride. It's a liability. So it just seems like common sense. Go ahead. Yes. Yes, sir.
Hello. I've been looking for some land. Could you guys make a list and make it available to everybody of these 1 acre lots that only cost $5?
I just had a question about, because you had mentioned that the other government, the new government, has districts.
Yes.
We 12 minutes outside of town. So our needs and our wants or whatever might be different than those that live in town. So do you have an idea about the districts? Because there's going to be 5 of them, I imagine.
Correct.
Is it like through the zip code, you know? kind of-
It's a little bit speculative at this time to suggest what they would be, but the districts are supposed to be equal as you can get them based on population. So that's how they would be drawn.
So if you divide the population of Edgewood and then figure out your area, what would be 1/5 of that, that would be virtually the size of your district.
Now, this whole government change issue, I'm not pro or against right now. I'm still trying to disseminate all this.
Good.
My question I have, if you have qualified local residents that want to do these offices, if you were to do this new type government, is that going to be possible? Because the only thing, you know, if our taxes and everything go up, well, I want somebody that's going to help run the town that lives in the town. And not somebody that lives way out in Timbuktu, you know, telling us how to run our town. That I might have an issue with.
Well, there again, you've got population. So let's say that there's a sparse population way outside of town, like Campbell Ranch or something like that. Then they would have to draw the district big enough to encompass 1/5 of the population of Edgewood. So it is a way of equalizing that interest, so you don't have the tail wagging the dog.
Was your question about the manager position
Well,
specifically?
I'm just saying in general, because now you're going to have 5 commissioners, which I think is good, like in Santa Fe, and I've had to deal with all of them recently myself. And it gives a better discussion floor over issues that are presented to them. And it's a little more, it's a lot formal, and so it's not based off of one person's decision. But my only concern is, if there's folks in this town that want to run for these different positions, they should have first dibs being from this town.
Correct, and generally there is a residency requirement for the district, yes. There was a question here, just a row ahead of you.
I want to clarify something. I moved into this place in 1991. The area I'm living in, it was totally built up, site-built houses by the end of 1991. It had always been county. The county refused to fix our roads until a school bus nearly toppled over with a bunch of kids, and then the wonderful county ended up beautifully sending gravel, which still turns into a mud bog whenever we get rain. I've asked the town, since they decided we were going to be a town, they didn't ask me, but they decided that you're going to be in the town now. They haven't done anything either. The other thing is, if they can build whatever they want to build and find some excuse for Campbell Ranch to be part of Edgewood, I don't know what fantasy land that comes from, but if they can do that, why can't they take the money that they were going to put into the sewer and pave our roads?
That's the question we've been asking.
Now, the other question I have is, who approved a sewer system anyway? And thirdly, are you telling me that if they finish getting what they want, some government weenie is going to come out to my house in my neighborhood and tell me I will have sewer or I'm going to suffer the consequences? Not in this lifetime. Not with me, buddy.
That is certainly the level of resolve that it's going to take. Someone here on the left side?
Is this on? Okay. So I might be the youngest person in this room, but that does not mean I don't know how politics works. So, thank you. This is a 100% fictional story, but it gives a good idea. So a man once comes to his son and says, "Will you marry the girl of my choosing?" The boy says no. Then the father says, but the daughter, or this girl is Bill Gates' daughter. The boy says, yes, I will marry her. So the father goes to Bill Gates and says, will you let your daughter marry my son? Bill Gates says no. So the father says, but my son is the CEO of World Bank. And Bill Gates says yes. So the father goes to World Bank and says, will you let my son be the CEO? The CEO says no. And then the father says, but my son is Bill Gates' son-in-law. And the CEO says, yes, this is how politics works. Is there a certain way, if we swapped from our current form of government to the 5-commissioner form, is that a way to prevent something like that from happening?
Well, certainly you have more accountability from your elected officials because you can recall them. You can, if they put in an ordinance you don't like, you can rescind the ordinance through the ballot initiative. It takes the vote of a majority of people. But you have all kinds of tools to hold people their feet to the fire. And that's sometimes what's lacking. That kind of thing you're talking about is what happens when there isn't accountability. So, I saw a hand back here.
Just a little quick comment about this form of government you're talking about. I've noticed, and I've been here in Edgewood for most of my life, and I'm not seeing that our voter turnout is pretty low for mayor and council members. People work in Albuquerque hours and hours, and a lot of people don't pay attention at all to what goes on Edgewood. They just don't care. I don't know why that is, but that seems to be the way it is. So you get all these districts that you're talking about. I'm concerned is, can you even get someone to run for council that lived in one of those districts? Because we don't have that many people running for council or that want to serve in this community in any capacity that I've noticed. And then if we get this manager that you're talking about, I would assume he's going to cost quite a bit of money. And where are you going to get him from? Does he know the needs of Edgewood? He will have a lot of control. I've been explained it's kind of like the school board superintendent. And the superintendent has quite a bit of control of the school. And if you don't like what he's doing, you're going to have to end up firing him. He gets a pay package, severance package. So I can see that costing the town a lot of money. And, you know, if people could, with the government we have, would start showing up to vote, you have representatives on council, you can email. You don't like those council members, you can vote them out. You can vote out the mayor if you don't like him. It works much like all the rest of our government works. Maybe these that you're talking about, Diane, might work in these bigger cities, but I'm concerned in Edgewood, if we would you could find a manager. You know, I'm just not sure how this kind of government will work. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, it's a matter of the, I think it takes that kind of commitment that we've heard from the audience in the last meeting as well, is you have to be, you get what you're willing to put up with, I think, when it comes to government. If you're not willing to put up with the kind of treatment you're getting, then it takes something a little more. You have to be active. Well, you all have showed an enormous willingness to be active, both at council meetings, on our social website, our social media, and also I know most of the audience is at home tonight, and we've had a phenomenal response to our council recaps. We've been doing the council recaps on Facebook, and we've also been doing the live stream of the council meetings. So I think the will is here, but you know, I can't predict that. All we can do is, with the commitment we've got to transforming this government to a more responsible and open environment. So yes, I see somebody back here.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that Aztec is not a very large town. Neither is Lovington or Raton, and they all have that form of government with the commission manager. And just like you were saying, you know, if you don't like them, this type of government, you can just boot them out. And of course, any kind of severance, it's up to the town to decide what that is. So I think we'd probably be better off at this point.
Is there anybody in the audience tonight that has an idea they would run for one of these commission positions for their district? So we see 2, 3, 4 hands, 5. So I think it's there. I mean, I think that's, I think the will is here now. And I think when people are educated, just like Thomas Jefferson said, that slide was up when he came in. If there's an informed electorate, there's no worries about the people taking care of their government.
I have not made my mind up about what I think is going to be the best route for Edgewood, but I've lived here long enough to see a number of elections. And the one thing I've learned is in a small town like Edgewood, if you're smart about what you're doing and you know the right neighborhood to campaign in, you've got all the votes you need with one neighborhood to get elected to council. That concerns me because it does mean that we don't have a broad representation of the people that live here. We are really a spread out community. We have a lot of different ideas, a lot of different valuable input on what could make this the most amazing community. And so that's the part that worries me, is that the campaigns and the elections that have happened here have been very strategic. And I can tell you the neighborhoods that are targeted because they're a little bit more dense, and it's easy to sway the opinion of that community by getting neighbors to rally together. If you get one of those neighborhoods, you get on council, no problem. So that's the advantage that I'm seeing of this proposed idea of a districted election. And to answer Cheryl's question about would we have to be paying a manager, we're paying a town clerk right now, so it's not like it's a position that, well, okay, we pay 2. We have I guess a deputy clerk and a town clerk. So we're already paying people in professional staff roles, so this isn't an additional cost per se. But I just wanted to point that out, that in our community right now, we don't have broad representation because of the way that elections can easily be accomplished.
And that's what caused the Boston Tea Party, right, was taxation without representation. I was around when Edgewood incorporated, and one of the big purposes or stated reasons was that they're tired of getting the tail end treatment from Santa Fe. Santa Fe has totally different ideas and interests. It's 60 miles away. So we were always getting there's like the tail wagging the dog down here. So Edgewood incorporated to get better representation, but now there are districts that have little bit different interests and different densities and different type of living arrangements. So it's important, and this is a way to get representation for every district in Edgewood.
Thank you. I just want to say quickly, power that is abused is soon lost. And I think Mr. Bassett needs to hear that. And I have a quick question. That area where they put the sewer on his property, how is that zoned? And what's the taxes on that?
I can certainly give you the information on the taxes if I were to pull up the spreadsheet. That one, I believe, has a more realistic value.
Wow.
It's up on the screen here, too.
Number 18.
Yes. Yes. Assessed full value land with structures on a small agricultural valuation. That's it, number 18.
Has the petition circulated to everybody? Has everybody had an opportunity to sign the ballot initiative petition? Is anybody not? Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up pretty soon. Has anybody got a burning question that they want to or comment? Oh yes, sir. I'm sorry. You've been ignored a couple of times. Can we get a mic up here?
The new form of government that you're talking about, if we wanted to change something, you said that we could do a referendum, but it's 20% of the voters would have to sign that petition.
Right.
That seems like an awfully large number for a place like this to get 20%, 1 out of every 5 people, like you said. That's a lot of people.
There are probably that many people in the room tonight, honestly.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
Yeah, because, and certainly on our live stream, we get about 300 to 700 people on the live stream.
Okay.
But you're talking about 550 people voting in the last election, so 20% is 100 people. I'll bet there's just about that many. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes, this side of the room here. I'll give you my mic.
Just a quick question. Would there be term limits on these two people?
Yes, 4 years. Yes.
Awesome.
The only other wrinkle is that the person who gets elected among the 5 commissioners to serve as mayor holds that position for 2 years before that election cycle rotates for that position.
Yeah, it's 20% of the people who voted in the last election. So, and there were only about 550 or so.
This gentleman here.
Now, in New Mexico, we have the best government money can buy, but I never did vote to become a part of Edgewood. Is it at all feasible? Like, I'm gonna live on the road.
Could you give him that mic so we can get it on the live stream? People can't hear him.
I'm gonna be towards the end of the road, the first road that Bassett's gonna run the sewer line on. And like I say, I never voted to become a part of Edgewood. They just threw it on me. Is it at all legally feasible to vote to succeed and leave the corrupt town of Edgewood?
Yes, there are always options, and believe it or not, there is one that I have investigated where you can disincorporate the town of Edgewood. It takes a petition with a certain number of signatures. I believe it's 15% of the people who voted in the last election for mayor, so roughly this 100-person threshold. And you could put it on the ballot to have the town wrapped up and dissolved. Here's the only flaw, because otherwise it sounds like a really good idea. If you do it, then the state and the county will reconcile the books and say Edgewood owes this much money. And then they will divide that sum against all of the people who are residents of Edgewood and assess it against you as a property tax.
So I want to say a couple of things before we wind up that are pretty important. Can we put that slide back up about the cost? Let's see, which one was it? The EPCOR cost versus El Dorado. I don't know which slide that was. Number 9, number 10. The one right after that. So we, the members of CORE started out as a pretty small group, and now we're a loose affiliation. We consider you all guys members because it's really just a citizen group. We're not interested in being separated from the community. We're just like you. I live here because I like living here. I like the character of the town. I don't want to see it ruined. So all of us have given our time and energy and our money. We have been funding what we're doing, including the lawsuit, out of pocket. So we think the lawsuit, and we haven't asked for money from anybody. We've actually been given money, but we haven't asked for it until now, because we thought the expenses we can bear ourselves out of our small group. The lawsuit, probably not. So it would be too unfair a burden on a couple of people. We think it's going to cost about $30,000 to prosecute this lawsuit over the next 10 months or so. That's about $3,000 a month. We had 350 people or so here at the last meeting. I imagine there's more on the live stream and about 100 here maybe tonight. But what I'm thinking is about the investment in our town. If EPCOR goes through, our bills are going to rise, there's no doubt about it. And I would imagine some of that will be buried in a property tax or a mill levy, just like they did in El Dorado. We are talking, if 300 people donated $10 a month for the next 10 months, it would cover all the lawsuit stuff. I think that's a pretty good investment to protect us from what's happening could happen with the water system. And then that doesn't take into account the sewer system, which can be 10 to 17,000, we figure, per hookup, depending on where you are. There's rock involved, et cetera, et cetera. So I never like asking for money, but this is a ground up kind of movement, and I want people to participate. Now, you all have showed up tonight. Those on the live stream are participating the way they can. Everybody can't participate at every level, but I'm telling you, showing up is a big deal. So thank you for showing up, because it's already made a difference. So one other thing besides showing up here that's made a difference is a lot of you I recognize have been at the council meetings when there were important issues that we needed to express our voice in a big way. So that's another way, and I appreciate that very much. The other way is we've had volunteers that have volunteered their time and energy, and that's terrific. It's helped us a lot. And the last way is money, which I recognize is your time and energy. Somebody's paid you for that time and energy somewhere. So I don't take it lightly, but I would appreciate it if you could find your way, if you can do it, please give to our cause. Let's put that email back up because there are ways that you can contribute. Now here tonight, we can take checks or cash donations. We have credit card swipers set up in each corner. So it can be done that way. You can also go to PayPal using this particular email, this one. And by searching that, you can make contributions that way. So I appreciate all of your contributions in showing up, which is most important, showing up at the council meetings, the time and energy you've taken, because I know you could be doing lots of other things tonight. So thank you very much for doing that. Can we get a mic? Hold on, just hold that thought 1 second.
If the town takes over Epcor, does it still fall under the PRC?
No.
Okay, so that means if the town takes over Epcor, the town can raise our water rates as much, as often as they want.
Yeah, that's one of the huge problems with letting a town take it over. That's why El Dorado was able to raise those rates. They would never get away with that under the PRC. The PRC, the Public Regulation Commission, holds the consumer utilities to account because they're monopolies. We have no protection other than the PRC. So they make them justify every expenditure before they expend it, or they're not going to get a rate increase if it's not justified. Yes, sir.
I just thought of something. That's 2 thoughts today. Well, that's more than I usually get. Didn't some mayor and some council some years back, and I don't recall when, didn't they decide they wanted to buy Ms. Bassett's land on the south side of Walmart? They didn't buy it. It was too expensive, so Walmart went there. And the land just east of Walmart, didn't they decide that they were going to allow some development company to build cluster housing there? Did that ever go away, or are we still waiting for that to happen, whether we like it or not?
I think the zoning is still there. So it could be allowed, and we thought...
Oh, we gotta get rid of that.
Well, we thought along with some of the counselors that that was the purpose of the sewer maybe. But now it's been run out into all these other areas where the zoning doesn't even allow that. I imagine we'll see new applications that will, because there's sewer there.
I'd move to Albuquerque if I went back.
That's my take on it. I would be in Rio Rancho or Albuquerque if I wanted to live in high density. And I'm not saying that it isn't a good thing. When I was 18, I was very grateful to be able to live in a low rent apartment because it meant independence for me. And, but you know, we need all levels of that, but Albuquerque serves for a lot of that. You know, young people tend to move to large cities because there's more opportunity there and they suffer the high density because of it, or maybe they like it. But it's nice, that's right. And then they move out here when they get to be my age because they want some peace and quiet.
Believe me, they come home.
I just want to thank you both for taking this on and spearheading this. You know, a lot of us haven't heard about this. We don't have, like this gentleman said, TV that actually broadcasts out here, but we do have a radio station in our area, and I think we need to get more of this on the air because a lot of us don't have time to read the paper or for whatever reason, and it's not like, you know, the news that you get streamed. So for somebody to take this on and make us all aware of what's happening, and that we have this website now we can go to and stay informed on all these issues is awesome. And I really appreciate the both of you taking this on and spearheading it.
Thank you very much. I would certainly be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the other people who have contributed greatly to our effort, and that's Bryce Simons, Karen Kaiser, Tom McGill, who's working the computer back there, Ray Seegers, Martha Eden, and I hope I didn't forget anybody else, but it certainly has been a collaborative effort, and Tom Torres has given some expertise related to water issues where we needed it, because frankly, we were lost in a mess of information, and as we began to sort through it, we started seeing things that were concerning.
Yeah, that's great. And also our counselors that have really tried to open up the government. It's been a real chore under the current system and being outnumbered 3-2. But Counselor Sherry Abrahams and Audrey Jaramillo both here tonight. I see Counselor Holly is here tonight as well. We appreciate you coming, even if you may not agree with some of the things that we want. But I think it's always good to have both sides and to hear it out and let people think for themselves. That's why we live in this country, I think.
Amen.
Yes, thank you guys.
Well, we'd like to thank you for coming. We certainly appreciate your participation. These are interesting times these days. Everybody stay safe and look out for your neighbor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.